A humble nanny throws herself into the sea to save two girls and almost loses her life in the second rescue. The act awakens the father's gratitude and the fury of the ex-wife, who reappears after years missing. But the leap that saved two children will begin a battle for love, truth, and belonging.
The rain lashing down on London that night seemed to mirror Marcus Campbell's exhaustion. The 42-year-old businessman was returning from 3 intense weeks in China, where he had closed million-dollar deals for his construction company, responsible for some of the country's most luxurious developments. The driver navigated the gardens of the mansion in Hampstead, stopping under the portico of the main entrance. Even exhausted, Marcus noticed something strange upon entering the house. The silence was disturbing. No sign of Henry, his 7-year-old son who, despite his shyness, always ran to greet him after his trips. The housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor, appeared quickly, avoiding his gaze. "Where is my son, Eleanor?" "I believe he's already asleep, sir. Mrs. Vanessa said he wasn't feeling well today." Marcus checked his watch. 8:30 p.m. Too early for Henry to be asleep, even on a school day. And my wife, Mrs. Vanessa, went out to a charity event. She said she'd be back late. The businessman went upstairs towards his son's room. The door was ajar, revealing the neatly made and empty bed. The room was impeccably organized, almost artificial in its perfection, without the usual childish chaos that Marcus secretly appreciated. An uncomfortable sensation ran through his body. Something wasn't right. He searched the upper floor. Nothing. In the game room, in the office, in the kitchen, no sign of the boy. That's when he heard a muffled noise coming from the garden. The rain had dwindled to a persistent drizzle when Marcus went out to investigate. The sound seemed to come from Carmel's doghouse, the Labrador they had adopted the previous year. As he approached, a chill ran down his spine, something beyond the cold of the London night. He illuminated the inside of the doghouse with his phone's flashlight, and his heart stopped. Huddled on a thin mat, in dirty pajamas, was Henry, clutching a worn teddy bear. The boy's face was pale, his once full cheeks now highlighted prominent bones, and his eyes, when they opened, revealed a terror no child should ever know. "Dad?" The voice was just a whisper. "Henry, what are you doing out here?" Marcus entered, crouching in the cramped space. "Aunt Vanessa said bad boys sleep with the dogs," he replied with a trembling voice. "I spilled juice on the new rug." Marcus felt a rage he had never experienced before, but he controlled it so as not to frighten his son further. Gently, he picked the boy up, noticing how much lighter he was than he remembered. "How long have you been out here, son?" "Since you traveled, Dad." The boy hid his face in his father's shoulder. "But Carmel keeps me company, and during the day I can go inside to do homework and take a bath." Marcus's mind processed the information with growing horror. 3 weeks. His son had spent 3 weeks nights sleeping in the doghouse, while he negotiated contracts on the other side of the world, and his wife, Vanessa, attended charity events across the city. He took Henry inside, directly to the main suite's bathroom. While preparing a warm bath, he noticed marks on his son's thin body, bruises at different stages of healing on his arms and back. Henry, sensing his father's gaze, lowered his head. "It was when I couldn't finish my food," he explained, in a voice so low Marcus could barely hear. During the bath, each new discovery was like a stab. The boy was visibly malnourished, with visible ribs and dull hair. His fingers were bruised, with nails bitten down to the quick. After dressing his son in clean pajamas, Marcus took him to the kitchen. Mrs. Eleanor, seeing them, paled. "Please prepare something for Henry to eat, Eleanor." The housekeeper, with trembling hands, began to prepare a sandwich and heat soup. Her eyes avoided Marcus's, laden with undisguised guilt. "I'm so sorry, sir," she whispered as she served. "Mrs. Vanessa forbade me from feeding him outside the time she set. She said I would lose my job if I disobeyed." Henry ate slowly, as if he didn't trust that the food would truly be his. Marcus watched, a deep pain mixed with growing anger at Vanessa, at himself for his absence, at everyone who allowed it to happen. "Where is the office key, Eleanor?" "In the pantry drawer, sir." After Henry finished eating and fell asleep in his father's bed, Marcus went to the office. He turned on the computer and accessed the house's security system. The cameras were programmed to store recordings for 30 days. He rewound the images to the day after his departure. What he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. Vanessa, his wife of 3 years, the woman who had promised to love his son as her own, transformed into another person when he traveled. The kitchen camera showed Henry sitting alone at the table, looking at a plate of clearly spoiled food, while Vanessa and a friend chatted animatedly in the living room, eating elaborate dishes. Other recordings showed the boy being pushed, having toys confiscated, being locked in his room for hours, and, most shockingly, images from the first night Vanessa dragged Henry outside, towards the doghouse, throwing a thin mat on the concrete floor, and ordering him to sleep there as punishment for being an unbearable boy. Marcus watched hours of recordings, meticulously documenting each incident, saving the files to an external hard drive. The knot in his throat tightened with each new scene, but he forced himself to continue. He needed proof. He needed to understand the extent of what had happened in his absence. When he finished, it was past 2 a.m. He went up to his room where Henry was sleeping soundly. He sat beside his son, observing his now relaxed face in sleep, and silently promised that no one would ever hurt him again. The sound of high heels on the marble hall announced Vanessa's arrival. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to control the fury that threatened to consume him. He wouldn't confront his wife that night. He needed a plan. The important thing was that Henry was safe now. He lay down beside his son, protectively wrapping his arm around him. The boy instinctively snuggled closer. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of their lives, and Marcus had a lot of work ahead of him. His business empire could wait. Now, there was a much more important battle to fight. The morning light flooded the room, waking Marcus. For an instant, he forgot the horrors of the previous night, until he felt the weight of Henry asleep against his chest. Reality returned like a punch to the gut. His phone vibrated, a message from August, his financial director, asking about the shareholders' meeting, scheduled for that morning. Marcus quickly replied, "Cancel everything indefinitely. Urgent family matter." He knew this would cause a stir at the company. But for the first time in years, business was not his priority. Careful not to wake Henry, he got up and went to the closet. Vanessa was sleeping soundly in the guest bed, as she always did when he returned late from trips. Better this way, he needed to organize his next steps before confronting her. He went down to the kitchen, where he found Mrs. Eleanor preparing coffee. The housekeeper's face was drawn, burdened by the weight of forced complicity. "Good morning, Mr. Campbell." "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said, keeping his voice low. "I want you to tell me everything that happened while I was away." The housekeeper sat down, her wrinkled hands trembling on the table. "It started right after you traveled. Mrs. Vanessa changed the house rules. She said Henry needed discipline, that you spoiled him too much." The woman paused, swallowing hard. First it was small punishments, no dessert, no television. Then she started controlling meals. She said he needed to learn to appreciate food. Eleanor described how Vanessa gradually intensified her educational methods, always maintaining the facade of a loving stepmother in the video calls Marcus made to speak with his son. She threatened to fire all of us if we told you anything. And Henry, she convinced the boy that you knew about the punishments, that you approved. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Why didn't you come to me, Eleanor? Why didn't you call me? I tried, sir. I sent messages saying I was worried about Henry. You replied that you trusted Mrs. Vanessa's judgment. Understanding hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. 2 weeks ago, he had received messages from Eleanor that seemed vague, but to which he had replied hastily during a meeting. Vanessa had access to his phone. She could easily have intercepted the messages. You should have seen the garden last night, Eleanor continued. The doghouse was lined with a blanket. I was the one who put it there, secretly, and I left food under his bed when I could. Marcus nodded, trying to control his emotion. Thank you for looking after him as best you could, Eleanor. I'll need your testimony later, if you're willing. I am, sir. I can't bear to see that little angel suffer anymore. After coffee, Marcus went up to check on Henry, who was still sleeping soundly. He took the opportunity to examine his son's room more closely. He opened the closet, finding impeccably organized clothes, many still with tags, for visitors and appearances, he supposed. The drawers told another story: worn underwear, holey socks, faded pajamas. In the bathroom, he found only a basic bar of soap and a worn toothbrush. None of the colorful children's products he'd always bought for his son. On the bookshelf, Henry's favorite books had disappeared, replaced by advanced volumes for his age, instruments of psychological torture, disguised as educational enrichment. Marcus photographed everything with his phone, documenting every detail. He went down to the office again, where he began to examine the household finances. As a meticulous businessman, he kept detailed records, but had delegated the management of the house to Vanessa after their marriage. The bank statements revealed an alarming pattern. Vanessa's personal expenses had tripled in recent months: designer clothes, jewelry, spas, exclusive restaurants. In contrast, expenses related to Henry's school supplies, extracurricular activities likes, had practically disappeared. Even more disturbing was the discovery of regular transfers to a company called RM Consultancy. A quick search revealed that the company was registered in the name of Rebecca Miller, Vanessa's best friend. Embezzlement, he murmured to himself, saving the documents. The sound of heels in the hallway announced Vanessa's approach. Marcus closed the files and turned to the door, preparing for the first confrontation. Vanessa Campbell entered the office as she always did, radiating calculated elegance. At 35, the former model maintained the impeccable posture that had distinguished her on the runways. She wore a silk robe, and her hair was perfectly styled, even though she had just woken up. I didn't know you were back, darling. She approached to kiss him, but Marcus subtly recoiled. Something wrong. Where is Henry? He asked, keeping his voice controlled. At school, of course. Monday, remember? Eleanor took him. Vanessa's smile faltered for an instant. Why? That's a lie. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on hers. Henry is sleeping in my room. I found him last night in the doghouse, Vanessa. Her face transformed into a mask of theatrical indignation. What? In the doghouse? Marcus, what nonsense is this? Henry must have gone to play there and fell asleep. You know how much he loves that dog. Stop the act, Marcus cut in. He told me everything, and I saw the security camera recordings. The change in Vanessa's expression was subtle, but noticeable. A momentary pupil contraction, a slight stiffening of her posture. I don't know what you're talking about. That boy always had too fertile an imagination. And you know how children exaggerate when they want attention. Do they exaggerate bruises too? Malnutrition, trauma. Marcus's voice rose slightly. The videos show you dragging my son to sleep in the cold, Vanessa. She changed tactics instantly, tears springing up with impressive ease. You don't understand the pressure I feel. Being alone, taking care of him while you travel the world. It's not easy being a stepmother. He tests me all the time. He challenges me. Tears now stream down, ruining her perfectly applied makeup. Perhaps I was too harsh at times, but always for his own good. You spoil him too much, Marcus. He needs limits. Marcus watched the performance, a painful clarity taking over his mind. For 3 years Vanessa had manipulated him, just as she manipulated everyone around her. Her public charity, her role as a dedicated stepmother, it was all part of an elaborate facade. Enough, Vanessa. It's over. What are you talking about? She tried to approach, but stopped when she saw his expression. Our marriage is over. I want you out of this house by the end of the day. The crying ceased instantly, replaced by a calculating coldness. You can't just kick me out like that. Half of this house is mine by right. We can resolve this civilly, but you will not be under the same roof as my son. Not after what you've done. Vanessa let out a dry laugh. You have no proof of anything, Marcus. It will be your word against mine. A workaholic father who abandons his son for weeks versus a dedicated stepmother who sacrificed her career to care for a problematic child. Marcus remained calm, surprising himself with his own control. I have all the necessary evidence, Vanessa. Videos, photos, bank statements, witnesses. And if you want to turn this into a war, I suggest you consider your own vulnerabilities. He paused significantly, like the transfers to Rebecca's company, for example. Vanessa's face visibly paled. Are you threatening me? I'm offering a way out. Get out of my son's life, and we can negotiate a discreet divorce. At that moment, a small noise came from the door. Henry was standing there, his eyes wide, his teddy bear clutched to his chest. Dad? The child's voice broke the tension in the room. Do I have to go back to the doghouse now? Marcus felt his heart clench. He approached his son, crouching to his level. No, son. You'll never have to sleep out there again. I promise. Vanessa seized the opportunity to completely change Henry with a sweet smile. Henry, my love, what nonsense is this? You must have had a nightmare. Stepmom would never send you to sleep outside. The boy recoiled, hiding behind his father. The fear in his eyes said more than any words. Marcus stood up, placing himself as a physical barrier between Vanessa and his son. Enough lies, Vanessa. From now on, you will only have contact with Henry under my supervision, until everything is legally resolved. You'll regret this, Marcus. Vanessa's tone no longer contained any trace of sweetness. No one rejects Vanessa Campbell. No one. She turned on her heels and left the office, leaving a heavy silence behind. Marcus knew the battle had only just begun. He needed to act fast, reinforce house security, hire a specialized lawyer, document everything. But looking at his son clinging to his leg, he also knew he would do anything to protect him. The war was declared, and he had no intention of losing. 3 days after the confrontation, the Hampstead mansion had transformed into a fortress. Marcus had replaced the entire security team, installed additional cameras, and changed all passwords and access codes. Vanessa, temporarily staying at Rebecca's apartment, bombarded his phone with messages alternating between veiled threats and emotional pleas. That sunny morning, Marcus watched Henry playing with Carmel in the garden through his office window. Each timid smile from his son was like a small miracle, signs of recovery gradually emerging. The intercom rang, announcing the arrival of Dr. Teresa Matthews. Teresa was considered one of London's best family law specialists. At 58, she carried a reputation for being ruthless in court, especially in cases involving children. Marcus received her in the main hall, leading her to the office. "Thank you for coming personally, Doctor," he said, offering her a cup of coffee. "Cases like this require discretion and speed, Mr. Campbell." Teresa adjusted her red-framed glasses, examining the folder she had brought. "I received the documents and videos you sent. Frankly, they are disturbing." Marcus nodded, his expression grave. "What can we expect? Your wife has already hired Dr. Philip Evans. He has a reputation for, shall we say, creativity in his tactics. We must prepare for a difficult process." Teresa flipped through some notes. "But the material you've gathered is substantial. The videos, especially, are strong evidence. What worries me is Henry. I don't want him to go through any more trauma. I understand. We will do our best to protect him during the process." Teresa paused, choosing her words carefully. "However, we need more information about Mrs. Campbell. People like her rarely start with this behavior abruptly. There's usually a prior pattern." Marcus frowned. He had met Vanessa 4 years earlier at a charity event. She had dazzled everyone with her beauty and apparent dedication to social causes. The romance was quick. Within 6 months they were married, to the concern of some friends who considered it all too rushed. "I hired a private investigator," he revealed, "Richard Norris, a former detective, highly recommended. He should arrive soon." As if summoned by his words, the intercom announced Richard's arrival. The investigator was a middle-aged man, with graying hair and a keen gaze. After introductions, Teresa suggested they continue the conversation in the office, away from Henry's ears. "Where do we start?" Marcus asked, after everyone had settled. "With the basics," Richard replied, opening a laptop. "What do we know about Vanessa Campbell before she became Vanessa Campbell?" Marcus realized, with discomfort, how little he knew about his wife's past. She always evaded questions about her family, mentioning only a difficult childhood in rural Scotland and a modelling career that brought her to London at 18. "She's been managing the New Paths Instituted for 2 years, he commented, "an NGO that supposedly helps vulnerable children." "Supposedly?" Teresa questioned. "Vanessa always controlled the Institute's finances with an iron fist. Only recently have I started noticing discrepancies. Large donations come in, few results appear." Richard made quick notes. "I'll investigate the institution's accounts. If there are diversions, that will strengthen our case." "There's something else," Marcus added. "Before me, she was briefly married to a real estate developer, Edward Peterson. The marriage lasted less than a year, ending shortly before we met." "Interesting," Richard murmured. "I'll look for this, Edward. People like Vanessa usually repeat patterns." Teresa checked her watch. "We need to act quickly. At any moment, she might try to obtain an injunction to return to the house or to see Henry." "What do you suggest?" Marcus asked, feeling his anxiety grow. "First, a complete medical examination for Henry with a trusted pediatrician. We need to officially document any physical evidence of abuse." Teresa made notes in her agenda. "Second, we will initiate divorce proceedings with a request for a protective order for Henry. Given the videos you have, we have a good chance of succeeding." Richard stood up. "Meanwhile, I'll start my investigation." There's one more thing you need to know. People like Vanessa are often masters of public manipulation. Prepare for a possible media campaign against you." Marcus nodded. As a public figure in the business world, he knew the power of the media well, and he knew that Vanessa, with her image as a social benefactor, had powerful connections. After the professionals left, Marcus went to find Henry in the garden. The boys showed him a drawing he had made, a large house with a man, a child, and a dog. "That's us, Dad. Just us." Marcus hugged his son, fighting back emotion. "Yes, son. It's us now." That afternoon, Marcus took Henry to Dr. Caroline Fisher's office, a forensic pediatrician recommended by Teresa. The examination was delicate, with the doctor documenting every mark on the boy's body. Moderate malnutrition, bruises at different stages of healing, chronic dehydration, all recorded in an official report. "He will recover physically," Dr. Caroline assured him after the examination. "But I strongly recommend psychological counseling. Traumas like these leave deep marks." On the way back home, Marcus received a call from Richard. "Mr. Campbell, I've found something you need to see. Can I stop by your house in an hour?" Richard arrived promptly, carrying a thick folder. In the living room, while Henry watched cartoons with Mrs. Eleanor, the investigator revealed his initial findings. "Edward Peterson wasn't her first husband," Richard began. "I found records of a previous marriage in Edinburgh with Claudia Matthews, a doctor. It ended, after less than 2 years, with a restraining order against her." "Restraining order?" Marcus was perplexed. "I managed to talk to Claude by phone. Reluctant at first, but when I mentioned there was a child involved, he decided to speak." Richard took a deep breath. According to him, Vanessa, who at the time used the surname Oliver, had episodes of extreme aggression. She was emotionally abusive to his daughter, who was 6 at the time. The last straw was when the girl appeared with cigarette burns. Marcus paled. "My God." "And there was no criminal prosecution. There was a settlement. She agreed to completely distance herself, move to London. And the family preferred not to expose the child to a trial." Teresa, who was also present, took detailed notes. "This establishes a pattern of behavior. We can use it as evidence. There's more," Richard continued. "After moving to London, she worked as a high-end escort for a while, before getting modeling contracts. Later, she was hired as a caregiver for an elderly lady, an heiress to a fortune in the textile industry. The lady died 6 months later, leaving a considerable sum to Vanessa in her will." "Let me guess, suspicious circumstances?" Marcus asked. "Nothing proven, but the family contested the will, alleging undue influence. They ended up with an out-of-court settlement," Teresa interrupted. "And about the institute? Did you find anything?" Richard opened a file on his laptop. "Of that amount, less than 2 million was effectively used in documentable social projects, and the rest dispersed among various consulting firms, including her friend's RM Consultancy, an events company called Gamma Productions, belonging to a cousin, and a smaller construction company, Horizon, which coincidentally was contracted for all renovations of the Institute's spaces." Marcus felt "That's where it gets interesting." The New Paths Institute received almost 12 million in donations over the last 2 years. Classic triangulation for diversion of funds. Exactly. And there's one more disturbing detail. I found reports from 3 former Institute employees alleging child mistreatment. The complaints were quickly suppressed with confidentiality agreements. Teresa closed her notebook with a heavy sigh. We are dealing with someone dangerous and unscrupulous, Mr. Campbell, someone who built an entire life based on appearances and manipulation. Marcus looked through the half-open door, where he could see Henry watching television, Carmel faithfully by his side. He felt an iron determination replace the initial shock. What's our next step? Tomorrow we will file for the protective order and divorce, Teresa replied. Richard will continue gathering evidence. Meanwhile, keep Henry safe and establish a normal routine for him. There will be a preliminary hearing soon, she continued. We must be prepared for aggressive tactics from her defense. They will try to paint you as an absent, workaholic father who suddenly decided to care about his son. Marcus nodded, aware of the challenge ahead. After the professionals left, he joined Henry in the living room. The boy leaned against him instinctively, something he rarely did before. Will Aunt Vanessa come back? He asked suddenly, his voice small. No, son. She won't live with us anymore. She said you would send me away if I'd told. The boy's eyes filled with tears. She said you didn't want me, that I was a burden. Marcus hugged his son tightly, feeling his own heart break. That will never happen, Henry. Never. You are the most important person in my life, and I promise that, from now on, I will always be here. As Henry finally relaxed in his arms, Marcus knew the war had only just begun. Vanessa had resources, contacts, and a carefully cultivated public image. But he had the truth, and for the first time he realized that was the most powerful weapon of all. The first hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a rainy Wednesday. Marcus had slept poorly, haunted by nightmares in which he lost Henry. At dawn, he checked 3 times to make sure the devices with the evidence were secure in his briefcase and that his suit was impeccable. Small details he clung to control his anxiety. Henry would stay with Mrs. Eleanor and an additional security guard. The boy, sensing his father's tension
going to be
during
okay,
breakfast,
Dad,
he said with a
his hand.
seriousness no 7-year-old should possess. Marcus smiled, swallowing the lump in his throat. Yes, son. It's going to be okay. On the way to the courthouse, Teresa explained the procedure again. It's a preliminary hearing for the protective order. Judge Eleanor Myers is known for being fair, but extremely rigorous with evidence. Don't let yourself be provoked by her lawyer or by Vanessa herself. The courthouse lobby buzzed with the usual activity of lawyers, officers, and litigants. Marcus kept his head down, trying to go unnoticed, when a flash momentarily blinded him. Mr. Campbell, is it true your wife abused your son? Marcus, why did you hide this for so long? There are rumors that this is all a strategy not to pay alimony. Can you comment? A small horde of reporters had materialized, microphones extended towards him. Teresa immediately placed herself between them and her client. No comment. This is a private matter involving a minor. We will ask the judge to issue a restraining order against the press if this harassment continues. Pushed by the courthouse security guards, they managed to reach the courtroom, where they awaited the judge's arrival. Marcus sat rigidly, watching the door. That's when Vanessa entered, accompanied by Philip Evans, her lawyer. She was unrecognizable compared to the cold woman he had wore a
faced days
discreet
ago.
pastel suit, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, light makeup highlighting tear-reddened eyes. She carried a small Bible in her hands, and upon seeing Marcus, her face contorted into an expression of pain that would seem genuine to any unsuspecting observer. Don't react, Teresa whispered. That's exactly what she wants. Evans, a middle-aged man with an elegant bearing and a calculating expression, approached to greet them with false cordiality. "Dr. Matthews, Mr. Campbell, I regret that we have reached this point. My client still hopes for an amicable resolution. Your concept of amicable must be very different from ours." "Dr. Evans," Teresa replied dryly. The murmuring in the room ceased when Judge Eleanor Myers entered. She was a 60-year-old woman, with grey hair cut in a straight bob and attentive eyes behind rimless glasses. Her reputation for intolerance of procedural manipulations was well known. Case number 4758, 2025. Divorce action with request for protective order in favor of a minor. Let's get straight to the examined the records. Mr. Campbell alleges child abuse by the stepmother, Mrs. Vanessa Campbell, and requests sole custody and a protective order. Correct? Teresa confirmed, presenting the initial evidence, the medical report, Mrs. Eleanor's written testimony, and some selected frames from the recordings. Your Honor, we also have videos that prove the pattern of abuse. They are disturbing, but essential to understanding the gravity of the situation. The judge examined the material in silence for long minutes. Her face remained impassive, but Marcus noticed a stiffening in her posture as she went through the photos of Henry's bruises. Dr. Evans, the defense. The lawyer stood up with the confidence of someone accustomed to reversing seemingly lost situations. Your Honor, we are facing a regrettable case of paternal manipulation and parental alienation. My client, a dedicated stepmother and respected philanthropist, is being victimized by a campaign orchestrated by her ex-husband, Evans continued, spinning a narrative in which Marcus was an absent father who, fearing substantial alimony payments, had instructed his son to lie about the bruises had other explanations, falls during play, school sports, and that the camera images were out of context. Mrs. Vanessa Campbell has always looked after her stepson's well-being, even taking on virtually sole responsibility for raising the child. While the father spent weeks traveling on business, it was Vanessa's turn to act. With a choked voice and tears in her eyes, she recounted how she had dedicated herself to Henry as if he were her own son, how she had faced challenges to establish healthy boundaries for a child who had never had any, and how she was now being monstrously slandered by the man she loved. Marcus felt his blood boil, but he remained outwardly composed, as advised by Teresa. When Vanessa mentioned that she would never, under any circumstances, deprive a child of basic comfort, he had to clench his fists under the table to restrain his reaction. Your Honor, Teresa intervened. We would like to present a specific video that directly contradicts the defendant's claim, with the judge's authorization. Teresa displayed the recording from the night Vanessa dragged Henry to the doghouse, clearly saying, "Ungrateful boys sleep like animals. Maybe then you'll learn to be grateful for the roof my money provides." The silence in the room became palpable. Vanessa visibly paled, while Evans whispered something in her ear. "Mrs. Campbell," the judge's voice was icy, "can you explain this recording?" Vanessa quickly composed herself. "It's out of context, Your Honor. Henry had done something extremely dangerous that day, played with matches, almost causing a fire. It was a moment of pedagogical frustration. He was only out there for a few minutes, as a lesson about danger, before being brought back inside." "That's a lie." Marcus's exclamation escaped before he could contain it. "He slept there for weeks." "Mr. Campbell, control yourself," the judge warned before turning to Teresa. "Is there proof that the boy remained in the doghouse for prolonged periods?" "Yes, Your Honor." Teresa presented an analysis report of the recordings, showing multiple nights when Henry was taken outside and only returned to the house the next morning. We also have the pediatrician's testimony confirming signs of continuous exposure to inadequate conditions. Evans counterattacked, presenting a sequence of photos from social events showing Vanessa and Henry smiling side by side. As you can see, Your Honor, this is a normal relationship between stepmother and stepson. Occasional conflicts do not constitute mistreatment. Posed photographs prove nothing, Dr. Teresa intervened. But we have something more substantial. She called social worker Clara Davis, who had visited Henry's school. Clara reported her conversation with teacher Deborah, who had noticed worrying changes in the boy's behavior. The child went from extroverted to withdrawn, began to isolate himself during breaks, showed a drop in school performance, and, on several occasions, appeared extremely anxious near dismissal time, Clara reported. The teacher also documented an incident where Henry appeared with a bruise on his face. When questioned, he said he had fallen down the stairs, but later confided to a classmate that Aunt Vanessa got angry because I spilled milk. The judge took detailed notes, her demeanor growing increasingly serious. When Evans tried to disqualify the testimony as school gossip, she interrupted him dryly. "Doctor, we are talking about a child's well-being. I suggest you focus on the facts." For almost 2 hours, the legal battle continued. Evans presented statements from friends of the couple attesting to Vanessa's affection for Henry. Teresa countered with the written testimony of Anthony, the family's former driver, who confirmed having seen Vanessa push the boy forcefully against the car after an event. When both sides concluded their arguments, the judge withdrew to deliberate. In the 30 minutes of waiting, Marcus remained seated, avoiding looking in Vanessa's direction, who alternated between whispering with her lawyer and pleading glances in his direction. Finally, the judge returned with her preliminary decision. This case presents disturbing elements that require maximum caution. Her tone was solemn. While it is premature to issue a definitive judgment on all allegations, the evidence presented is sufficiently serious to warrant immediate protective measures for the minor. She consulted her notes before proceeding. "I determine that Henry Campbell shall remain under the exclusive provisional custody of his father, Mr. Marcus Campbell. Mrs. Vanessa Campbell is prohibited from any contact with the minor without judicial supervision until the conclusion of the psychological and social evaluations to be carried out in the coming weeks." Vanessa let out an audible sob, while Evans seemed to be quickly calculating his next moves. Additionally, the judge continued, "I designate periodic, unannounced visits by social workers to the paternal residence for monitoring the situation. The family court's multidisciplinary team will conduct a psychological evaluation of the minor within 10 days, with a subsequent hearing to re-evaluate the measures." Striking the gavel, she adjourned the session, not before giving a penetrating look to both parties. "I remind those involved that the primary objective of this court is to protect the minor. Any attempt to use the child as an instrument of dispute will be severely penalized." Leaving the courthouse, Marcus and Teresa again faced reporters. This time, however, there was a new element. Vanessa, red-eyed and with a trembling voice, was giving an impromptu interview. "I am devastated by the false accusations. I love Henry as if he were my own son. This is a cruel attempt to separate me from him and avoid a fair division of assets. Teresa pulled Marcus away, but not before they saw the flashes capturing the image of Vanessa wiping carefully produced tears. "She's going to use the media," Teresa commented. "Prepare for difficult days." In the car, on the way home, Richard called with news. "I phoned the former butler of the Peterson family, her previous husband. He's willing to talk, but he's scared. Apparently, he was paid to keep quiet at the time of the divorce." "Offer whatever is necessary," Marcus instructed. "We need all possible evidence." At home, Henry ran into his father's arms as soon as he saw him. The simple gesture, the trust being reborn in his son, was all the confirmation Marcus needed that he was on the right track. "How was your day, son? I drew at school. Want to see?" The boy held out a paper where he had drawn two figures, a man and a boy, holding hands under a smiling sun. "That's beautiful, Henry." The teacher asked where Mum was in the drawing. The boy hesitated. "I said I didn't have one, just you. Is that wrong?" Marcus crouched down, looking into his son's eyes. "No, son, it's not wrong. We are a family, you and I, and that's what's most important." As Henry ran to show the drawing to Mrs. Eleanor, Marcus checked his phone. A message from Richard made his stomach clench. Vanessa gave an exclusive interview to the Bare Truth program. It airs tomorrow. The media war was just beginning. But Marcus was determined to protect his son, no matter how dirty the battle became. "I'm being publicly crucified for loving a child who is not my own." Vanessa's choked voice echoed through the room as Marcus, Teresa, and Richard watched the interview aired on Bare Truth, one of the country's most popular and sensationalist sitting on a white leather sofa. Vanessa was the perfect image of the wronged victim. Simple dress, hair without the usual elaborate styles, teary eyes that bravely looked into the camera. "I dedicated 3 years of my life to this boy," she continued. "I gave up my career, my personal dreams, to be the mother he never had. And now, I'm accused of being a monster for trying to impose limits on a child who grew up without any." The presenter, Denise Coleman, known for her aggressive approach and for turning personal stories into spectacles, leaned in with false empathy. "And your husband? How did he react when you tried to help with his son's upbringing?" "Marcus was always an absent father," Vanessa replied with a dramatic sigh. "Constant travel, endless meetings. Little Henry barely knew him. When I tried to show that the child needed rules, structure, he accused me of being too strict." The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing a solitary tear sliding down her perfectly made-up face to appear natural. "What hurts most is that I am being prevented from seeing the boy I learned to love as my son. And why? Because I demanded he apologize after deliberately breaking a crystal vase. Because I insisted he'd do his homework before playing video games." Denise offered an additional tissue, her expression of false solidarity almost comical in its exaggeration. "And the accusations that you made him sleep outside." Vanessa let out a sad laugh. "A cruel invention. Henry loves that dog. He spent hours in the doghouse playing with him. There was only one time I found him sleeping there after an argument we had about table manners. He had hidden there to worry me. When I found him, I immediately took him inside." The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Vanessa skillfully turning every accusation into a demonstration of her misunderstood love and necessary discipline. In the end, the presenter turned to the camera with an indignant expression. "We are witnessing the destruction of a woman whose only fault was loving a child who is not her own too much. How long will we allow powerful men to use justice as an instrument of personal revenge? Marcus turned off the television, his face pale with contained fury. "She's twisting everything," he murmured. Teresa made quick notes on her tablet. It was expected. This is just the first salvo. She's going to try to win public opinion. Richard, who had watched the interview in silence, finally spoke. "The worst part is, it's working. Social media is already buzzing with hashtags like #justice for Vanessa and #heartmums. Double quotes. Should I respond?" Marcus asked. "Give my version." "Absolutely not," Teresa replied emphatically. "Entering this media war would only harm Henry. To keep the focus on the legal process and his well-being." "I agree," Richard added. "Besides, I have news that could change the game. I secured an interview with George Silver, former butler of the Peterson family. He confirmed that Vanessa showed abusive behavior towards the previous husband's daughter. He's willing to testify, and there's more," the investigator continued. "I discovered serious irregularities in the New Paths Institute's accounts. Almost 70% of donations were directed to companies linked to Vanessa or her associates, with little or no proven service delivery." Teresa nodded, satisfied. "This strengthens our position. Judge Myers is known for valuing concrete evidence over emotional drama." The intercom rang, interrupting the conversation. It was security, announcing the arrival of social worker Clara Davis for the first unannounced visit. "Remember," Teresa whispered before leaving naturalness, "don't look rehearsed." Clara was a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a notepad always at hand. Marcus received her in the living room, offering coffee, which she politely declined. "I need to speak with Henry alone, Mr. Campbell, and then I'd like to observe the interaction between you." Henry was in the library, reading one of the children's books Marcus had recently bought to replace the advanced and intimidating volumes Vanessa kept on the shelves. The boy looked up, tense at seeing a stranger. "Hello, Henry." Clara smiled gently. "My name is Clara. Can I talk with you for a little while?" The boy's gaze sought his father, who nodded encouragingly. "It's all right, son. I'll be in the living room if you need me." The conversation between Henry and Clara lasted almost an hour. When they reappeared, the boy seemed more relaxed, though he still held the book firmly against his chest, a protective gesture that broke Marcus's heart. "Now, I'd like to see you two together," Clara requested. "Perhaps you can show me what you normally do in the afternoon." Marcus took Henry and the social worker to the garden, where they had started building a small vegetable patch. In recent days, this activity had become a pleasant ritual, a symbol of a new beginning that both appreciated. "We planted carrots yesterday," Henry exclaimed, showing the row of small mounds of earth. "And today, we're going to plant tomatoes. Dad said I can take care of them myself." Clara watched intently as father and son worked together, noticing how Marcus gently guided, without controlling, how Henry gradually loosened up, laughing when a little dirt fell on his father's sniker. "What are you going to do after the garden?" she asked casually. "Homework," Henry replied promptly. "Then we can play video games, but just a little bit, because reading is more important." "Who said that? Dad?" Henry looked at Marcus with a shy smile. "But he always reads with me, so it's fun." After Clara left, Marcus received a call from Teresa. "How was the visit?" "Hard to say. She took a lot of notes, asked a lot of questions, but remained neutral. That's standard procedure. But we have a bigger problem now. Vanessa filed an emergency petition alleging that you are alienating her son against her. She's demanding immediate supervised visits." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Can she get that?" "It's possible. The duty judge who received the petition is not the same one from our hearing. I am preparing the contestation, but we must prepare for the possibility that Henry might have to meet her soon. The possibility of forcing Henry to meet the person who had traumatized him was terrifying. That night, as he put his son to bed, Marcus struggled to hide his concern. "Dad," Henry called out as he snuggled under the covers, "is that lady today going to take me away?" The question caught Marcus by surprise. "No, son. Why do you think that?" "Aunt Vanessa used to say that if I told about the punishments, people would come and take me to a place where bad children are alone." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, holding his son's hand. "That's not true, Henry. Clara is here to help, to make sure you're well and happy. What if Aunt Vanessa comes back?" The question hung in the air, laden with genuine fear. Marcus chose his words carefully. "I'm doing everything I can to keep you safe, Henry. Trust me, okay?" The next day, the media war intensified. Reports on businessman Marcus Campbell's family drama appeared in various outlets. While some merely reproduced Vanessa's allegations, others began to question her version, especially after Richard had anonymously leaked information about her past to selected journalists. The Total Investigation Program aired a special report suggesting irregularities at the New Paths Institute, with anonymous testimonies from former employees mentioning a toxic environment and a contradiction between public discourse and internal practice. Vanessa quickly counterattacked, giving interviews to morning shows where she presented herself as a victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a vengeful husband. Strategic tears, constant references to her unconditional love for Henry, and insinuations about Marcus's wild life before marriage made up her carefully constructed narrative. The climax of this narrative war occurred during a charity event for underprivileged children, where Vanessa appeared as a guest of honor. Before the cameras, after an emotional speech about every child's right to a loving home, she dramatically fainted, being promptly attended to by doctors present. Emotional and physical exhaustion due to stress, a doctor conveniently diagnosed for reporters. Images of Vanessa being taken away in an ambulance, seemingly unconscious, instantly went viral. At the Campbell mansion, Marcus watched this spectacle with a mixture of disbelief and concern. The tactic was working. Commentators were divided between those who condemned Marcus's cruelty and those who questioned Vanessa's excessive theatricality. "She's good," Richard commented, who was monitoring social media. "Very good. But we're better prepared," Teresa replied, who had arrived with new information. The judge denied the request for emergency visits, citing the need to await the full social services report, a small victory, but significant. That afternoon, Clara Davis returned for another unannounced visit, this time accompanied by Dr. Paul Rogers, a child psychologist appointed by the court. Henry, initially reluctant with the new professional, gradually relaxed during the assessment session disguised as play. Paul was a specialist in childhood trauma and used play therapy techniques to access feelings that children often couldn't verbalize. The revealing moment occurred when Paul asked Henry to draw people who live in your house. The boy drew himself, his father, and the dog Carmel. When gently questioned about Vanessa, Henry became visibly tense. "She doesn't live here anymore," he simply replied. "And how do you feel about that?" Paul asked. Henry hesitated, looking at the door as if checking if they were really alone. "Happy," he finally whispered. "I can sleep in my own bed now." Paul then suggested a game with dolls, where Henry could tell family stories. What emerged was disturbing narratives of disproportionate punishments. emotional isolation, and psychological manipulation consistent with systematic abuse. After the professionals left, Marcus found an unusually optimistic preliminary report is favorable to you, she informed him. She observed positive interaction between father and son, an adequate environment, and clear signs of emotional recovery in Henry. And the psychologist, Dr. Paul, is extremely respected by the court. If his report confirms signs of trauma associated with living with Vanessa, it will be a devastating blow to her narrative. The confirmation came the following week. Dr. Paul's official report, delivered to Judge Myers, diagnosed Henry with signs consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, likely resulting from prolonged exposure to a hostile and unpredictable environment. The document expressly recommended removal from the trauma-triggering agent and maintenance of the current care structure, which demonstrates providing necessary emotional security for. On the same day, the media landscape took a surprising turn. The respected newspaper The Chronicle published an extensive investigative report on the New Paths Institute, revealing schemes of resource diversion through shell companies. Internal documents, obtained from anonymous sources, which Marcus knew were the result of Richard's meticulous work, showed that less than 15% of donations actually reached the supposedly benefited children. The reaction was immediate. Corporate sponsors announced the suspension of donations, pending a full investigation. Celebrities who had publicly supported Vanessa began to discreetly distance themselves. The public prosecutor's office announced the opening of a preliminary investigation into possible crimes of embezzlement and misrepresentation. While Vanessa's public empire began to crumble, Marcus remained focused on what truly mattered: Henry's recovery. The routine they had established, breakfast together, school, afternoon activities, quiet dinners, created the stability the boy desperately needed. Slowly, Henry was becoming a child again. The nightmares, once frequent, became rare. His appetite returned. Clothes no longer seemed so loose. Small smiles, shy laughs, curious questions, every sign of recovery was silently celebrated by Marcus. The legal battle was not yet won, but the truth was finally beginning to emerge. And for Marcus, seeing his son running through the garden without fear in his eyes was already the greatest victory possible. The following weeks brought a strange calm to the case. Clara Davis's last visit had occurred 3 days earlier, and her final report was about to be delivered to Judge Myers. Vanessa, after the scandal involving the Institute, had withdrawn from the media, cancelling previously scheduled appearances and interviews. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Marcus prepared pancakes for breakfast, a weekend ritual Henry loved. The boy had helped mix the batter, and now watched fascinated as bubbles formed on the surface of the pancake in the pan. "Can I flip it now, Dad?" he asked, holding the spatula with determination. "Just a little longer." Now, with his father's guidance, Henry flipped the pancake with an expression of absolute concentration, followed by a radiant smile when the maneuver was successful. "I did it. Perfect, Chef Henry." Marcus affectionately ruffled his son's hair. They were setting the table when the intercom rang. Security announced the arrival of Rebecca Miller, Vanessa's best friend. Marcus frowned, surprised by the unexpected visit. "Stay here in the kitchen with Mrs. Eleanor, son. I'll see what she wants." Rebecca waited in the entrance hall, impeccably dressed as always, but with an unusually tense expression. Her manicured fingers drummed nervously on her designer bag. "Marcus, I need to talk to you About Vanessa. She looked around, as if checking if they were truly alone. She doesn't know I'm here. In fact, she'd kill me if she knew. Intrigued, Marcus led her to the living room, purposely leaving the door ajar so Eleanor could observe from a distance. "What's wrong, Rebecca? You've always been her biggest defender." Rebecca sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa. "I was, or I thought I was." She took a deep breath. "Vanessa is different. Since the Institute scandal, she's been obsessed, saying things that scare me. About how she's going to get Henry back, about how you're going to pay for what you did. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm afraid of what she might do." Rebecca lowered her voice. "Last night, after a few glasses of wine, she mentioned a plan to solve everything at once. She talked about taking Henry out of the country, about how she has connections that can provide documents." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "That would be kidnapping, I know. That's why I'm here." She opened her bag, pulling out a flash drive. "There are recordings of her conversations with questionable people. I don't know exactly who they are, but they sound like facilitators. There are also emails about money transfers to overseas accounts." Marcus took the flash drive, still suspicious. "Why'd a change of loyalty, Rebecca? You two were always inseparable." "Because I realized I don't know the real Vanessa." Rebecca seemed genuinely disturbed. "When the accusations about the Institute came out, I didn't believe them at first. But then I started to notice discrepancies in the accounts she asked me to approve as financial director." She paused, visibly uncomfortable. "I admit I turned a blind eye to a lot, but I never imagined the extent, And now, these veiled threats against a child. I cannot be an accomplice to this." After Rebecca left, Marcus immediately contacted Teresa and Richard, who arrived in less than an hour. While they checked the contents of the flash drive, he reinforced house security and instructed that Henry should not be left alone at any time. "This is pure dynamite," Richard commented, examining the files. "She's clearly planning something illegal. We should take this to the police immediately. And also to the court," Teresa added. "I am going to request an emergency restraining order based on this new evidence." Security measures were doubled in the following days. Marcus reorganized his schedule to work exclusively from home, and Henry's school was alerted not to allow the boy to leave with anyone other than his father or Mrs. Eleanor, regardless of any emergency claims. The week passed tensely, but without incident. The hearing to evaluate the final social services and psychologist reports was scheduled for the following Monday, and Teresa was confident of a favorable decision. On the Sunday before the hearing, Marcus allowed himself a moment of relaxation. Henry had had a good day, played in the garden with Carmel, enthusiastically helped water the promising vegetable patch, and even read aloud a complete story for the first time since the crisis began. Small victories that warmed the father's heart. They were having dinner when the intercom rang. It was security, announcing that Vanessa was at the gate, demanding to see her son. "She claims to have judicial authorization for a supervised visit," the confused security guard informed him. Marcus immediately called Teresa, who confirmed there was no such authorization. "It's an attempt at manipulation. Do not allow her entry under any circumstances, sir," the security guard interjected. "She's very agitated, threatening to call the police, claiming obstruction of a court order." "Let her call," Marcus replied firmly. "There is no order." Henry, who had heard part of the conversation, looked at his father with wide, fearful eyes. "Is she coming in, Dad?" "No, son. It's all right." Marcus tried to keep his voice calm. Let's finish our dinner, okay? But the moment of tranquility had been broken. Henry barely touched his dessert, constantly looking at the window as if expecting to see Vanessa appear at any moment. As he put his son to bed, Marcus stayed by his side until he fell asleep, noticing how the boy clung to his teddy bear, behavior that had decreased in recent weeks. He was awakened in the early hours by the silent alarm system he had installed in Henry's room, a device that only alerted his phone when the door was opened. He jumped out of bed immediately, rushing down the dark hallway. The scene he found froze his blood. Vanessa was in Henry's room, leaning over the boy's bed, who was cowering against the headboard, his eyes wide with terror. Somehow she had bypassed security. "What are you doing here?" Marcus's voice cut through the tense air. Vanessa turned slowly, an unsettling smile on her lips. She wore an elegant black dress, as if she had come directly from some social event. "I came to see my son, of course." Her voice had a strange, almost ethereal tone. "You missed Mummy, didn't you, Henry?" Henry didn't answer, his eyes fixed on his father, silently pleading for help. "You don't have authorization to be here, Vanessa." "I'm calling the police." Always so dramatic, Marcus. She turned to Henry. "Your father loves to make scenes, but we know the truth, don't we? We know who truly cares about you." Marcus realized with growing horror that something was wrong with Vanessa. Her movements were erratic, her eyes weren't fully focused, and there was a distinct smell of alcohol emanating from her. "Henry," he called calmly, "come to me, son." The boy tried to move, but Vanessa blocked his path with a sudden movement. "You're not going anywhere. We have to fix this mess your father created." She gripped the boy's arm with excessive force, making him let out a small whimper of pain. "Now, you're going to listen to me, boy. When the social worker asks, you're going to say that your father never did anything wrong, that it was all just a misunderstanding." Henry trembled visibly, silent tears streaming down his face. I can't lie," he whispered. Vanessa's face contorted into an expression of rage. "Of course you can, and you will." She raised her free hand as if to slap him. At that moment Marcus acted on instinct. He moved quickly, positioning himself between Vanessa and Henry, and pointed to the corner of the ceiling. "It's all being recorded, Vanessa. The cameras are on." She froze, following his gaze to the small, discreet camera installed after the case began. For a moment she seemed genuinely confused, as if she didn't fully understand what was happening. Cameras. In every room. Yes, with audio. Recording everything, including right now. Understanding slowly penetrated the fog of alcohol and emotion that seemed to envelop Vanessa. She released Henry's arm, stepping back. You can't do that. It's an invasion of privacy. I can in my own home, especially to protect my son." Marcus kept his voice firm, while positioning himself protectively in front of Henry. "Leave now by your own means. It's over, or Vanessa. Wait for the police to arrive." For a brief instant, Vanessa seemed to hesitate, as if considering other options. Then her face took on an expression of cold resignation. "This isn't over, Marcus. Not by a long shot." She turned on her heels and left the room. Marcus followed her at a distance, making sure she actually left the house. Through the living room window, he saw her get into a car waiting on the street, evidence that the invasion had been premeditated. When he returned to the room, he found Henry still trembling under the covers. He sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking his son's hair. "She's gone, Henry. You're safe." The boy nodded slowly, but still seemed scared. "Will she come back?" "No, son. I won't let that happen again." Marcus tried to smile reassuringly. "Do you want to sleep in my room tonight?" Henry silently agreed. Marcus carried him to his room, settling him into the large bed. Even after his son finally fell asleep, he remained awake, watching over his sleep, while sending urgent messages to Teresa and Richard. The next morning, Teresa arrived early, watching the recording of the invasion with a grave expression. "This is pure gold in legal terms," she declared. "Breaking and entering, attempted coercion of a minor, explicit physical threat. I'm requesting an emergency hearing today." Richard, who arrived shortly after, brought additional news. "I found out how she got in. Apparently, she had made copies of the keys before she left. As for security, one of the night guards is new. She simply said she'd forgotten something important, and he let her through the back gate." The emergency hearing was granted for that same afternoon. Judge Myers, visibly disturbed after watching the recording, did not hesitate in her decision. This court immediately grants a restraining order against Mrs. Vanessa Campbell, prohibiting her from approaching within 500 meters of the minor Henry Campbell or his residence. Her voice was hard as steel. "Additionally, I am bringing forward the final hearing to this Friday." Considering the gravity of the new elements presented, leaving the courtroom, Teresa seemed cautiously optimistic. "The judge is clearly leaning in our favor. The invasion was a catastrophic tactical error on her part." "Error?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm not so sure. Her behavior was too erratic, almost as if she was decompensating. Narcissistic individuals often collapse when they lose control of the narrative," Richard commented. "The fall of the Institute, the loss of social status, the impending judicial defeat. It may have been too much for someone accustomed to manipulating everyone and everything around her." That night, as he put Henry to bed, this time in the boy's own room, with reinforced security, Marcus noticed something different in his son's expression. "Everything all right, Henry?" The boy was silent for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "Dad, Aunt Vanessa ... is she sick?" The question caught Marcus by surprise. "Why do you ask that, son?" "Because she seemed different yesterday." In her eyes, Henry made a vague gesture towards his own face, like she wasn't really herself. Marcus chose his words carefully. "Some people have problems that we can't see from the outside, Henry, like a pain that's hidden inside them, that sometimes makes them act in ways that hurt other people, like when she made me sleep with Carmel." "Yes." Marcus took a deep breath, fighting back emotion. "But that doesn't make what she did right. Nothing justifies hurting a child." Henry was thoughtful for a moment. "Will she get better someday?" "I don't know, son. That depends on her wanting help." Marcus stroked the boy's hair. "But the important thing is that you're safe now, and we're going to keep it that way." As Henry finally fell asleep, Marcus reflected on his son's question. The childlike innocence that could still feel empathy for someone who had hurt him so much was moving, and a sign that, despite everything, Henry's heart remained intact. The legal battle was nearing its end, but Marcus knew the journey of recovery had only just begun. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when the emotional scars would manifest in unexpected ways. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something akin to genuine hope. The truth had emerged, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning. The day of the final hearing dawned clear and sunny, as if nature itself smiled upon what was to come. Marcus adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, trying to calm his racing heart. Despite Teresa's confidence in the evidence gathered, he knew nothing was guaranteed until the judge's final gavel. Henry appeared at the bedroom door, already dressed for school, watching his father get ready. "You look like a superhero," he commented, with a small smile. Marcus crouched down, adjusting his son's shirt collar. "Really? And what superhero would I be?" "Iron Man," Henry replied promptly. "Because he has money. But the most important thing is that he's smart and protects people." Marcus swallowed hard, touched by the comparison. "Thank you, son. That means a lot to me." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Today is an important day. The judge will officially decide that you will live with me forever." Henry's face became serious. "What about Aunt Vanessa? She won't be able to be near you unless one day, when you're older, you want to, and the doctors say it's safe." The boy nodded, seeming to process the information. Then, surprisingly, he asked, "Can I go with you to the hearing?" "I don't think that's a good idea, son. It might be tiring and stressful, but I want to be there." The determination in the child's voice was impressive. Clara said, "It's important for me to say how I feel. That adults need to listen to children too." Marcus quickly consulted Teresa by phone. Surprisingly, the lawyer did not immediately dismiss the idea. "Judge Myers is known for valuing the child's voice in the process," she explained. "If Henry truly wants to be present, and if you believe he is emotionally prepared, it could strengthen our case. But the final decision is yours, as a father." After reflecting, Marcus agreed to take his son, on the condition that he would wait in a separate room with Mrs. Eleanor and would only enter the courtroom if and when called by the judge. The courthouse was less tumultuous than at the previous hearing. The case, though still attracting attention, had lost some of its initial sensationalist appeal, especially after the revelations about the irregularities at Vanessa's institute. In the courtroom, Marcus immediately noticed Vanessa's absence. Only her lawyer, Philip Evans, was present, with a visibly uncomfortable expression. "Where is your client, Dr. Evans?" Judge Myers asked, as soon as the session opened. "Your Honor, Mrs. Vanessa Campbell is unable to attend for health reasons. I respectfully request the postponement of this hearing." The judge examined a document that appeared to be a medical certificate. "Nervous exhaustion and dehydration do not seem to me to be sufficient justifications to postpone a decision that involves a child's well-being, Doctor, especially considering the gravity of the new elements brought to this court." Evans tried to argue, but the judge's determination was clear. The hearing would proceed as scheduled. Over the next 2 hours, Teresa methodically presented all the gathered evidence, the house videos, the medical and psychological reports, the testimonies of former employees, the financial records showing material neglect of Henry, while Vanessa spent fortunes on herself, and, finally, the recording of the nighttime invasion. Evans tried to contest some points, arguing that the videos could be edited, that the bruises could have other causes, that Henry's emotional stress could result from the traumatic separation from the stepmother he loved as a mother. But his argument sounded increasingly hollow, lacking the necessary conviction. At the crucial moment, the judge asked the question that would change everything. This court would like to hear directly from the minor, Henry Campbell, if he is present and willing to speak. Marcus nodded to Teresa, who requested the boy's entry. Henry walked slowly into the room, holding Mrs. Eleanor's hand, his large eyes cautiously scanning the unfamiliar environment. When he saw his father, however, he visibly relaxed. Judge Myers, normally stern, softened her expression as she addressed him. "Hello, Henry. Do you know why we are all here today?" The boy nodded. "To decide if I'm going to live with my dad. That's right. And I would very much like to know how you feel about it. There are no right or wrong answers, okay? I just want to know what you think. Henry looked briefly at Vanessa's lawyer, then at his father, and finally at the judge. When he spoke, his voice was small but firm. I want to stay with my dad. He never makes me scared. He never makes me sleep outside. And he always says he loves me, even when I do something wrong. And about your stepmother, Vanessa, how do you feel about her? Henry hesitated, biting his lower lip. She scares me. When my dad traveled, she turned into another person. She said I was a burden, that nobody really wanted me. Are you afraid to meet her again? The boy nodded emphatically. She said if I told, bad things would happen. And then she came into my room at night. I don't want to see her again, please. The simplicity and honesty of the testimony were more powerful than any elaborate legal argument. The judge thanked Henry, who was led back to the waiting room by Mrs. Eleanor. When the decision came, it was unequivocal, considering all the evidence, the technical reports, and especially the direct testimony of the minor involved. This court determines the exclusive and definitive custody of Henry Campbell to his father, Mr. Marcus Campbell. The judge continued, detailing the complementary measures, a permanent prohibition on Vanessa approaching Henry without express judicial authorization, mandatory psychological treatment for the boy, referral of copies of the process to the public prosecutor's office for investigation of possible crimes of mistreatment and psychological abuse, and separation of financial aspects to be dealt with in the divorce proceedings. This court, the judge concluded, has as its fundamental principle the best interest of the child. In this case, the evidence leaves no doubt as to where that interest lies. Leaving the courtroom, Marcus felt simultaneously exhausted and reborn. The weight he had carried for months finally dissipated. In the hallway, Henry waited anxiously, his face lighting up at seeing his father's expression. "Did everything go well?" he asked. "Yes, son. Everything went well. Let's go home." 3 months had passed since that decisive day. Spring now filled the gardens of the Campbell mansion with colors and fragrances that seemed to symbolize the rebirth happening inside the house as well. Marcus had made profound changes in his life. He had delegated many of his company functions, drastically reducing travel and reorganizing his schedule to be present in his son's routine. The once workaholic now left promptly at 5 to have dinner with Henry, help him with homework, and participate in the sacred time of storytelling before bed. The house had also transformed. What was once a showroom of social status, decorated to impress visitors, was now a true home. Henry's room had been completely renovated with his active participation, blue walls with fluorescent stars on the ceiling, shelves full of books and toys, a special table for drawings and scientific experiments. In the garden, the small vegetable patch, started during the crisis, now prospered, becoming a joint project that symbolized both their growth. Carmel's doghouse remained, now just the dog's home, but also a silent reminder of what they had overcome together. Henry flourished under constant care. Weekly therapy with Dr. Paul helped process the trauma he had experienced. Nightmares, once frequent, became rare. His appetite returned with vigor. The skinny boy now had rosy cheeks and inexhaustible energy. At school, teachers noted with satisfaction his return to active participation in classes and the rekindling of friendships. As for Vanessa, the consequences of her actions unfolded on multiple fronts. The criminal investigation into the New Paths Institute progressed rapidly, with former partners and employees finally speaking about the toxic environment and questionable practices. Documents revealed a sophisticated scheme of donation triangulation through shell companies, with systematic diversions that directly benefited Vanessa and her inner circle. In the divorce proceedings, evidence of improper conduct weighed against her financial claims. The final settlement, far from her initial demands of half of everything, reflected the severity of the actions proven during the litigation. The criminal sentence, when it finally came, imposed significant restrictions in addition to restitution to the defrauded donors. Vanessa was prohibited from working in any charitable entity or one involving children. The penalty included supervised community service and mandatory psychological treatment. Her public image, once carefully constructed as a dedicated philanthropist and loving stepmother, had completely collapsed. The doors that once opened icily for the former model now remained closed. Invitations to charity events dried up, participation in campaigns was cancelled, and even old friends from her social circle now avoided public association. For Marcus, however, revenge or punishment were never goals. His focus remained exclusively on Henry's well-being and the rebuilding of their lives. The traumatic experience had transformed his perspective on what truly mattered. One Sunday morning, as they prepared breakfast together, another tradition established in recent months, Henry surprised his father with an unexpected question. "Dad, why are some people mean to children?" Marcus paused, carefully choosing his words. "It's not always because they are mean, son. Sometimes those people also suffered when they were little and never learned to deal with it. Other times, they have problems they can't control. That doesn't make what they do right, but it helps to understand, like Aunt Vanessa. Yes, what she did was wrong, very wrong. But there are probably things in her past that made her that way." Henry absorbed the information in silence, thoughtfully stirring his scrambled eggs. "I'm lucky," he finally said. "Why, son?" "Because I have you. Because even when bad things happen, you're here with me." Marcus felt his eyes well up. "I'm the lucky one to have you, Henry. You taught me what really matters in life." That afternoon, as they played in the garden with Carmel, the intercom announced the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Lucy Miller, a neighbor and retired teacher who occasionally exchanged plants with Marcus, appeared with a small seedling. "For your vegetable patch," she explained, handing the pot to a curious hen. "It's basil. You can use it in the tomato sauce I know you're learning to make." What began as a simple exchange of plants had evolved into a valuable friendship. Lucy, a widow without children, had a quiet wisdom and a practical disposition that perfectly complemented the new dynamic of the Campbell family. Gradually, she had become a constant presence, helping with recipes, suggesting books for Henry, offering discreet advice to Marcus on the challenges of single parenthood. "I need help with my science homework," Henry announced after planting the basil. "It's about the water cycle. Can I show it to Aunt Lucy?" As he watched his son, animatedly explaining his project to the attentive neighbor, Marcus felt a wave of gratitude. The storm had passed, and although the scars remained, life went on, richer, more fulfilling than he had ever imagined. That night, after putting Henry to bed, Marcus found a drawing carefully left on his desk. Titled "My Real Family," it showed smiling figures: Marcus, Henry, Carmel, Mrs. Eleanor, their neighbor Lucy, and even Dr. Paul, every person who had helped rebuild his world. In the bottom corner, in the still irregular handwriting of someone learning to write. A simple sentence that said it all. "Home is where I'm not scared." Marcus framed the drawing and hung it in his office, as a daily reminder of what truly constituted success in life. It wasn't the million-dollar contracts or the luxury developments, but the ability to create a space where his son could grow without fear, loved unconditionally, safe to simply be a child. The experience had also awakened a greater purpose in him. In the following weeks, he discreetly began to use his resources and influence to support serious child protection organizations. He funded training programs for social workers, pushed for improvements in abuse reporting protocols in high-income contexts, and initiated a project to create a specialized psychological support center for traumatized children. In a conversation with Teresa, who had become a friend as well as his lawyer, Marcus expressed this new mission. "I want to use my voice for those who cannot speak. For children silenced by appearances, by power, by fear. If Henry's story can help save another child from going through the same thing, ... But quotes Teresa smiled. "It's already helping, Marcus. Your case set an important precedent in court. Judge Myers cited it in 2 recent decisions, prioritizing the child's emotional well-being above social appearances." On the last night of that transformative autumn, Marcus and Henry began a new tradition, an amateur astronomy session in the garden. With the telescope the boy had received for his birthday. Observing the stars, they talked about constellations, distant planets, and infinite possibilities. "Dad," Henry asked, his eyes still glued to the telescope, "we're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Yes, son, we're going to be very okay." And under the same sky that had witnessed their darkest nights, father and son now contemplated a future illuminated by stars of possibilities, built on the unshakable foundation of true love, constant presence, and the courage to defend the truth, no matter the cost. End of story, dear listeners. We hope Marcus and Henry's story has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If you enjoyed this journey of overcoming and paternal love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the bonds that unite us. Share your impressions of this story and what else you would like to hear on our channel in the comments. We look forward to reading your reactions.